Good morning. All right, I'm here sat with three wonderful people. So much to say, and we'd love to hear everything. I'm here with Marte Gerhardsen, with Pearmain, and with Alejandra Ycaza. And if we can quickly do a round of introductions of who you are and kind of maybe the context of which you're here, the lens that you bring into this conversation.
Okay, my name is Marte. I am Director of Education in Oslo. So I'm responsible for all the schools and all the students and the teachers. And of course, I'm here to learn and to be inspired. And I'm already definitely, and especially after that speech from the young people, that are really at the core of what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. My name is Alejandra. I am from a small town in Ecuador, in Latin America. I am the leader of institutional development at Fundación Reimagina, which means Reimagine Foundation. And we work to ensure that children have access to the skills that they need to thrive in 21st century society. We work all around Latin America, but our main office is in Chile. I also work in Casa Grande University, which is a university in Ecuador, and it's known as the Rebel University, so the university that is bringing people from different backgrounds, socioeconomical backgrounds, and it's trying to encourage them to think creatively and think uncomfortably on how to solve society's most pressing issues.
Good morning. My name is Mark Pearmain. I'm the Superintendent CEO of the Surrey School District. We're located in British Columbia, Canada, on the West Coast. About 85,000 students, a very, very diverse community of about 197 different languages spoken. And I think what a great way to set the scene of student agency this morning from our two students who really called to action the expectation of leaders like us and you in the room to push the education system forward, which I'm excited to have a discussion about this morning.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be an open conversation with you guys asking each other questions, me asking you questions. Thank you for trusting me and guiding the conversation. And I'm looking forward to it. You guys ready to get started?
Yep.
Awesome. The first thing I'm really curious about to get your perspective on is why is change needed, and why do we need it now? Whoever will, yeah.
Could start out. Well, obviously, as the young people said on the stage, it is absolutely needed. And I also think the Finnish Minister of Education articulated it very well yesterday when he said that you only have to look out the window. Because when you look out the window, you see a world that is more polarized. Climate threat is hitting us. It's more polarized. Democracies are under threat. And to solve that, we have to have young people who are engaged and will stand up for solidarity, democracy, and freedom. So on a societal level, definitely we need it. But also on the individual level, because these young people are coming out in a world where they need different kind of skills than before. Of course, they have to have the basic skills in place, but they also need to enhance creativity, problem-solving ability, and also collaboration. So we have to equip them so that they can, take charge of their own life and have a good life in the future, and that's our duty. So therefore, yes, we need it, and we need it now.
I can go next. I agree with you, Marte. At an individual level, I invited my nephew a couple of weeks ago for lunch. And after lunch, he was saying that he wanted to go for ice cream, and I told him, no, because you have to go and do your homework. And he laughed and he told me, my homework is automatic, so I can actually go and have an ice cream with you. And I asked him, what do you mean your homework is automatic? Like, I've never heard of that. And he told me, well, what I do, he first said, I cannot believe that you do not know this. And then he told me, what I do is that I go home, I put my homework into ChatGPT, I get the answer, I print it out, and there, it's automatic. And for me, that was just like one of the many signs that artificial intelligence has already changed the way education is working. And right now, it is widening the socioeconomic gaps that we face around the world and inequality, but we can use it as a tool to close those gaps. And we are at a pivotal moment right now. The International Commission on Financing Education said that by 2030, half of the world's jobs are at risk due to automatization. So we need, as Marte was saying, we need to develop a breadth of skills in kids. We need well-rounded individuals that do not only know math, but also know different soft skills that will help them solve society's problems, that we do not know what the future society problems would be in a couple of years. So I definitely think that the moment is now, and we have AI as a tool to create efficiency, but to not substitute the human side and the human skills that people need.
Yeah, I think as well, when we think of the structures of systems that we currently lead and run, those are built on models that are 20, 40, 60, 100 years old. And the fact is that many of us have been shifting when it comes to the curriculum that we're teaching. We're shifting in terms of assessment, but we haven't talked about structures. So we also know now that if any person has a smartphone, the concept of knowledge is right there. You can get information. So it's not about, in some cases, access to information. It's now about ensuring our students and leaders of the future know how to ethically utilize that information, how to ethically reason in terms of the knowledge that they may be getting through AI, and how is that going to help humanity versus hinder. And those are skills that if you take a look at the structures that we currently have, they're not really foundational of the system structures that are built. And I think of the two students, Theo was talking specifically about mental health and normalizing the fact of speaking about that. But when you think of mental health, what does that look like in our structures? She gave us an example of actually getting grounded and centered by actually having a check-in in the morning. But our current structures also aggravating the mental health of students. And do we need to really challenge those traditional paradigms of how we have done things to shift to support our future leaders as they grow and move forward?
Yeah. I'm wondering, from what I hear you saying, like because information is so accessible, we no longer need to do things in a certain way. Is that right?
I think there's foundational things that we need to ensure our students have. You know, you have to make sure that students can read and write and do mathematics. Those are core foundational pieces, so we can never park those. But access to, historical documents or access to opinion coming through a smartphone or a tablet at this point in time it's just there. So what about the skills when it comes to critical analysis? What about the skills in terms of collaborating with people? Those types of skills that we really need to, I think, begin to harness and instill in our children, future leaders, so that they are prepared into a society that we can't imagine that's going to happen in 2036 of a kindergarten student entering today.
And also, if I can add on to that, because when you've seen, following the political debate lately, it becomes obvious that it's extremely important that we have children that know scientific method and thinking, and that they can actually accept that something is a fact and something isn't. And they have to, and also we need to build trust in the society among each other and towards the community as a whole. And I think school is a very important place to start building trust by ensuring that everybody in the classroom feel that they are valuable, that they're part of a community, and that I think maybe that's, if you want to pick up one really, really important thing that we have to change, is to ensure that we have this feeling of belonging in the society, which is really at stake now. And I think that also goes to the mental health discussion. We have to create this safe, good classroom to be in, where everybody feel that they have a role to play and that they are valuable. And if we manage to do that, I think we have gone important step forward.
I agree with. I think we're all in consensus that things need to change, and that the structure that we have right now puts the emphasis in the wrong things. Because of course we need to teach, as you were saying, math and how to read. And I mean, we talk about, for example, in Latin America, where 8 out of every 10 children from the age of 10 do not understand what they are reading. So that's scary. But at the same time, if we put the measurements and the focus only on these skills and completely forget about critical thinking, about problem solving, then we're not giving teachers much room to innovate. They have a curriculum that in many cases is very prescriptive, and they have measurements. And we're talking yesterday about this, about standardized tests,
Yep.
where teachers have to prepare their students for a certain test, because that's how teachers measure their success, and students measure their success as well. So how do we find the middle point where you're able to emphasize as well the breadth of skills that we were talking about?
No, that's really a very important issue. We are right now in Norway, my country, we are introducing a new curriculum, which is very much based on the OECD Learning Compass. So it has it's a really good curriculum, we all love it, but it's really hard to implement it, because at the same time, we have to, handle all the challenges that arise in the classroom and the school every day, and we have, we have the tests, and we have all the traditional tasks we have to do. So it's a little bit like rearranging the furniture inside a plane while it's in the air. So it's really to combine that and to set aside enough time to read, because what you really need to do, you have to get all the teachers on board. And you have to get the parents on board as well. So it takes it's quite a daunting task really to do this. And I guess you have the same problem also in Canada.
Well, and I was just going to add to that for many of our parents, they went through a system which they know, which is 20, 30, or 40 years ago. And it's hard to imagine or ask them to see a future that, again, we don't know what's coming, and changing a system. So when you talk about changing your system and getting your parents on board, it's almost a continual cycle of having those conversations, because every time someone new comes into your system, they want to revert back to what it was, right? Which is a really interesting space to be in. I think the other thing, just to be really clear when it comes to innovation in education, there is a discourse, political leaders want to see something happen within 4 years. It's usually on a cycle. But the reality is that innovation and changing a system really needs to be measured over a 10 or 20-year cycle. And you need to have the courage, both within the system and also trust within the organizations, to allow that to happen. Because otherwise you just get into this cycle of continuing, quote unquote, innovating, but really you're not letting anything take root, and you just revert back to what you were doing in the past. And that is a space that I think is becoming more and more difficult to enter into, as the trust in government institutions is beginning to lessen in certainly different parts of the world that we're seeing. And so really trying to build that foundation of the why, as Alejandra talked about, is so important to ensure that it happens for our kids.
We need stamina.
What you were talking about, like the political cycles, I think it's super important, because as you were saying, education results take time. With Fundación Reimagina last year, we did a study with UNESCO where we measured the state of education innovation in Latin America. And what was interesting was that 43% of government representatives were willing to start collaborating, were willing to collaborate to help teachers develop 21st century skills. But the challenge was a very basic challenge. The main challenge was, hey, we do not have access to technology in schools. So yeah, the willingness is there, but there are things in the infrastructure that need to change. And then we were talking yesterday, I think with you, Marte, as well, about funding. And our panelists yesterday talked about it as well, that, if funders put the emphasis in all of this like supermarket list of short outcomes that require a lot of time for organizations that are trying to innovate to comply with, and at the same time they are not measuring how the system will change, or if we can predict how this will impact the system, but they're measuring just what you're using the money in that immediate moment for, then we're not going to get different results if we keep funding the same way.
I'd love to do a little exercise with you guys to take us to the next phase of this discussion. And you guys are welcome to join in. So I think we all agree that education needs some kind of change. We're all here for that. But every one of us has a different view as to how, different view for the future, different vision. It needs change, but in what way? So I'd love to do a little imagination exercise and a little journaling. So if you want to take a notebook and a pen or a phone, and you guys have paper and a pencil behind you.
Okay.
We're going to take a minute to do something called a flow of consciousness. So you're going to put the pencil on the paper and start writing. I'm going to have a prompt and ask some more follow-up questions as we're going, but try to not stop writing. And if you don't know what to write, just say, I don't know what I'm writing, blah, blah, blah. Just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. Okay? So the prompt is, how do you see, if you could snap your fingers and redesign the education system or learning from the ground up, how would it look like? You can start writing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's learning? What are people learning? Where are people learning? If you go into a learning space, what does it look like? How are we measuring success? Who's teaching who? All right, that was a minute.
Okay.
I hope there wasn't too much blah, blah, blah. We can wrap up final thoughts. And from I'm really curious what came up. What did you see? What do you envision?
Shall I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. The first was that this setting, with someone sitting up here and the others listening, taking notes, should be the exception in the future. You know, I see education that is completely different, where the student is active in their own learning, and so that's much more where they take ownership to what they learn. So that was a student, and then where should the classroom be? And it could be everywhere. You have to get out of that, you know, those walls. Sometimes it's good to be there, but sometimes it's better to be outdoors, at the construction site, at the museum, to really expand the idea of where teaching can take place. And then I was thinking, who teach whom? And I think that is, we had a very interesting discussion yesterday about learning about between generations. And I think, of course, we as adults, we can learn so much from young people. At the same time, I think it's also important to appreciate that you also have experience and know something that you can actually teach others. So I think I think everybody has something to teach each other. Yeah, I can stop there. So sorry.
I wrote something similar as well, and I think we could have kept going like this. I love this exercise. For me, like this ideal system is where children are happy going to school. Like it's not a place they hate, but rather a place they love. They go to school and they do not only learn in their classrooms, but they are taken outside of school to learn all around their communities. And the focus is not only what we're talking on, like key subjects, but also on critical thinking and on a breadth of skills in general. I want a system where teachers are empowered, so they're empowered to adapt what they are teaching to the local challenges in the community, and children are expected to help solve those problems. So their projects are applied, they are part of what's happening, and they're relevant for them. I want a school and where they feel safe, and I think that's every day more important, where they feel that they can go and they're gonna be okay. And something that I also think it's important is to have not only teachers, but people from the private sector, government officials, interact with students. They have opportunities to learn from the community as a whole and not only from one person.
So very similar. I envisioned a system that just has multiple entry points for children. So regardless of where they're at and where they're coming from, their abilities, they can enter into a system that will allow them to flourish and to show their skills. I was imagining a system where the teacher and the student are learning together. And so there's many opportunities where it's actually the student who would become the teacher, and the teacher would actually take the step back. But really focusing in on those skills of collaboration and communication, regardless if it's peer-to-peer or peer-to-adult. I also was envisioning a system that is global. So, we live in such an interconnected world, and yet students in Helsinki don't really ever have an opportunity to connect with students in Vancouver, and students in Zambia don't have the privilege of connecting in because of barriers that have been set up. So how do we create that system where a child in any part of the world is going to be able to learn with another child in a different part of the world? And finally, I think just getting to that space of beginning to shift maybe some traditional ways of entering into post-secondary education, because I think of it kind of from birth to grave. And right now, there's so many barriers, be it financial, be it academic standards or whatever it is, or measurements, that don't allow some of our students to be able to enter in and show their knowledge and be able to give their knowledge back to post-secondary. And so what does that look like in that kind of interconnected global opportunity for kids to learn together and then also to share together?
I like what you said about like the global mindset. I think it's like in Reimagina we say global mindset. So you have you know what's happening in the globe, but you also know what's like in your roots and what's happening in your community. So you have a mix of both.
Yep.
And I think that's important as well.
I learned a new word today, global. I like that.
But I also can add to that, because I think what you're talking about is in a way already happening. Like in Oslo, in Norway, 40% of our children have other mother tongue than Norwegian. Mm-hmm. So, and they have contacts in the countries they come from, and all that cultural impulse is coming into our schools and to our countries. So in that way, we are, just by staying in Oslo, you can be quite global, and I think you can do that in Helsinki as well. So the world has changed, I think, already quite a lot.
Thank you. These are beautiful visions, really. As a young person, it's like, I would love this, please. And you guys are already doing a lot to push for that vision. And I'm curious to hear more about that. But what is it that you do in order to really push for the things you envision? And especially, what have you found that's been a big challenge, and how do you overcome it?
You want to start, maybe?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I think we each have privilege of position, right? So there's opportunities that maybe we have that others don't. So it's partly to hear the voices of those that aren't sitting in the positions that we have. So if I think of what we're doing in Surrey, there's lots of work on racial equity and trying to recognize the systems barriers that have been created that have been holding students back internally. And in the context of my role, like what I can do is that becomes a space where it becomes, well, this is what we're doing. And then it's protecting the staff that are doing the work and lifting the voices that need to be lifted. At the same point in time, I think that we're tasked with looking to the future and beginning to plant the seeds for our community to follow, which, if I do it properly, I think the seeds will be planted and we'll start down that road, and there'll be a roadmap and opportunity for future leaders. Maybe Fia wants to come over and be the superintendent in Surrey when she grows up, to take that next step and to continue to push us forward. So it's a little bit of setting the stage and setting the road to be able to make that shift, And when you find those moments, Ron, to be able to actually take that step forward, then you jump at that moment and you push it forward as you can.
Well, I think I totally agree to what you said. And to be very sort of practical, what are we actually doing right now? I think we are, as I said, in the process of implementing a new curriculum, which gives a much stronger position to the teachers. We want the teachers need to take ownership, and we need to develop the professional community at every school, so that school development can really start within.
Yep.
And to do that, in my position, I try to encourage the principals to make sure that they create this good learning environment in every school. So of course, I'm working through the system very much, but that's why it's so wonderful to be here, to get all these ideas from people sitting a little bit outside the system and looking at us and saying, okay, this is how you should do it, this is another way. So I think we need to, as you said, to be very open. We have to work, use the structures and be systematically, but also try to all the time listen and be open to new ideas of new way of doing things.
Yeah, I like what you said about the structures and how we use the structures. At Fundación Reimagina, we're trying to do that as well, but from the private NGO sector. We recently launched a consortium where we have different organizations in Chile. And what's interesting here is that we are working in different communities with local organizations that are working with partners to scale their programs. So we're funding their programs, the programs that they already know that are working and that they are scaling. But at the same time, we are spending a lot of effort on collaborating and coordinating ourselves with a shared work plan, a clear vision on what we're changing in the system and how do we expect to see that in the longer term. And it's been really interesting because we've been able to work with the existing structures, with policymakers and with local governments to make sure that the projects not only stay as closed projects, but that we have the opportunity to learn best practices and to scale. That's on one side. And on the other side, with Reimagina as well, we have a program called Aprendo en Casa. And Aprendo en Casa is an ecosystem of more than 80 organizations across Latin America, where different organizations share their resources with us, and we curate them in a free access resource hub for teachers. And what's interesting there is that we're right now exploring ways in which AI, with the support of WISE, in which AI can help us personalize these routes to different teachers' contexts and technology levels so that they are able to access the resources they need, but adapted to their own reality. And I think we're doing a lot of progress in that, and we'll still developing it, but again, we're trying to go beyond these specific outputs and think about the system and how we're changing the system as a whole and the results that we want to see.
Do you have, if you could, one piece of actionable advice, what can I do today, or the people here do today, or the people listening at home can do today to try and push closer to the things that we envision? A single piece of advice. It's a big one, I know.
I can try. I think, of course, there's not one thing. To get there, we have to have many initiatives and efforts, but to ensure that all those efforts and initiatives takes us in the right direction, it's extremely important that we have a common narrative and a common vision of where we're going. So I think maybe the most important thing we can do is to ensure that we have this, establish this common narrative in our own communities. We have to get the teachers and principals on board, but we also need to get the parents, the community, the politicians, and to work on that common narrative and that common vision. I think that's probably the most important. And in that sense, I think we can look to Helsinki, because what they have done here is extremely encouraging and inspiring. So I'm going to go back and try to do the same. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a common narrative, so let's have a common narrative. But also, I think we need, and as I said before, we need to fund differently. So we need to work collaboratively. If we want different results, we need to work collaboratively between the government funding and the private sector funding, and fund mutually reinforcing activities that are going towards the same vision. So let's not duplicate the way we fund things, but let's try to complement ourselves. And Collaboration and funding is it's an emerging field, but I think there's a lot to be done there. And it just requires getting away of these immediate outcomes and being okay with a bit of uncertainty.
I think that we need to recognize that voices that may not agree with us, we need to stop and genuinely listen to understand, and not to try and persuade, but to give voice to those folks that may not understand or see or agree. Because if we simply barrel ahead without bringing on the members of our public, then we're not going to be able to move forward. And it's really important for us to, I think, take that lesson. I think the other thing I would say is that I live on the traditional territories of the Squamish Nation, an indigenous nation in British Columbia, and there's a saying there that Sonamote, who's a leader there, has taught me, which is called Chen Chen Sui, which means we are all in this together. And then that includes the folks who don't necessarily agree. We're all in this together, and we can't forget them.
Yeah, thank you. I want to try something, if I may. There's a practice we do at a community called Youth by Youth, asking what-if questions. What if learning was not bound to the four walls of a classroom? What if teachers and learners learned together? There's some what-if questions I'm sensing from the conversation here. I want to open up the space and see what will happen if I encourage you and you to think for a second and just say, what if, and your what if question, based on what you heard, based on your own feelings. I'm going to shut up now. And slowly, I think the room might blossom with some what if questions. Don't be shy.
What if every child had equal opportunities?
What if we weren't slowed down by fear?
What if mental health was a priority?
Just say them, no need to raise your hand, let's just bring them out.
What if we didn't have tastes as a medium?
What if we fix it instead of changing?
What if there's no school anymore?
What if baby 0 to 2 months old had all the love they needed?
What if the whole child was at the center?
Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was lovely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should we read this?